Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. There is a Portuguese language expert with us today who is an assistant professor at the Department of Portuguese and Lusophone Studies, Goa University. Let us talk to him and know his journey. Welcome to the show, Dhruv.
Thank you all very much for this opportunity, Lalita ma'am.
Welcome. Dhruv, I would like to start by asking you, how did you develop an interest in Portuguese?
So, as you know, Goa was a Portuguese colony for nearly 451 years, from 1510 to 1961. So there is a very strong legacy of Portuguese rule in Goa, right from cuisine, architecture, and even in the language. So even in my mother tongue Konkani, that is Goan Konkani, we use a lot of Portuguese language words. So I was exposed to that right from my childhood at my home. And thanks to my grandfather, who was a senior advocate, who had studied Portuguese law. So he exposed me, he made me, as a young boy, he made me aware of these Portuguese words which are used in Konkani, and that aroused my curiosity to know more. And my family further developed this interest in me. So I started learning Portuguese right from 8th standard in school. And I was lucky that my school offered Portuguese as a third language.
I see. Okay. That was a very early introduction to the language, right? Dhruv, what are the opportunities and challenges while learning Portuguese?
So opportunities, I would say there are many for right from the point of view of a career perspective. There are many opportunities for, that's what you want to know, right? The opportunities are
right.
So in my home state of Goa, so there is a huge demand for Portuguese teachers in schools, higher secondaries, and colleges. There are institutes that want to start Portuguese classes or as a third language or second language, but there is a shortage of teachers here in Goa. And another opportunity here I see in my state is the translation of old Portuguese documents from the colonial period, which are in administrative, judicial, bureaucratic documents to Portuguese. And many of them are handwritten in a very, rather I would say, an illegible scrawl. And many of them have been faded over time. And there is a huge need to translate these documents to Portuguese. So other opportunities I see is in the field of translation and interpretation, of course, as with other languages, and in localization.
I see. Okay.
As far as the challenges are concerned, so one would be the lack of awareness about this language and lack of avenues also to learn Portuguese.
Okay.
And another, I would say, is the grammar, which is not Portuguese in terms of grammar is not exactly the easiest language to learn. So its grammar is much more complex as compared to French and even Spanish. I would say, having learned many languages, I would say it is on par with German in terms of its grammar.
I see. Okay. And just a curious question, what are these Lusophone studies?
So the prefix Luso refers to Portuguese, which comes from the Roman name for Portugal, that is Lusitania. So Lusophone is the Portuguese speaking. So Lusophone studies would encompass the study of the regions that were once part of the Portuguese Empire, which are now Portuguese speaking or connected to the Portuguese heritage in some way or the other. So this would include, apart from Portugal, of course, Brazil, which is by far the largest Portuguese-speaking country today and the most prominent one. And apart from that, there are 5 countries in Africa today, which are namely Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, that is Cabo Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Sao Tome and Principe. And then there is one in Southeast Asia called East Timor. Then you would also include Macau, although I don't think anybody speaks Portuguese in Macau anymore. Then you have Goa, Daman, Diu in India, and a few other places. So the study of these regions as a collective would be termed as Lusophone studies.
Okay, okay. Thanks for sharing. Dhruv, you received a scholarship for PhD. Please tell us about it.
So I decided to do my PhD whilst teaching at Goa University as an assistant professor after completing my 3 years of compulsory teaching at Goa University. So I started out with my paid study leave from Goa University for 2 years.
Okay.
So for which I had to sign a bond with Goa University to return and teach for 3 more years. So the third year, which was unpaid, I received a scholarship from an entity called Fundação Orient, which is the Oriental Foundation. This is a private Portuguese institution that is connected with the study of the Lusophone world, that is the Eastern hemisphere of the Lusophone world, that is the Orient.
I see.
So apart from this, the other Portuguese institutions that offer scholarships are Institut Camões, which is the Portuguese equivalent of the Alliance Française, Goethe Institute, and Instituto Cervantes. So that is the official Portuguese institute. So apart from this, there are Brazilian scholarships also offered by the Brazilian government, namely the PEC-G for graduate studies, PEC-PG for postgraduate studies. There is another one called GCUB-MOB, also from the Brazilian government. So there are many scholarships available for Portuguese studies in Portugal and Brazil that I'm aware of.
Okay. Nice. Then you have published various articles in newspapers and magazines. So can you tell us what was the focus of the writing, or what were the subjects?
Yes. So what happened was, there is this newspaper in Goa called Herald. So it used to be a Portuguese language newspaper called O Heraldo. So recently, in the last few years, they decided to restart a Portuguese language column on Sundays. It was called Notas Soltas, that is loose notes. So they invited me to write for this column, this Sunday Portuguese column. So one article that I wrote on was on my experiences of living and studying in Portugal. So then I wrote one more on how Ganesh Chaturthi is celebrated in Goa. Then I wrote a third one about my grandfather, senior advocate Dhruv Usgaonkar, this article was written in January 22, but he passed away on 30th of June. So it was about his contribution to the legal field in Goa, which included that, as you know, since Goa was a Portuguese colony, we had the Portuguese law here in Goa.
Okay.
So my grandfather translated the Portuguese family laws from Portuguese to English.
Okay.
So it was about his contribution to the legal field. So this was one article that I wrote.
Acha, okay. Then you translated old documents from the Portuguese period. So can you tell us how has the language changed over the period?
So this old document that I've translated from old legal documents, it was just as an experience to see if I was any good at it. But I noticed that the language has undergone various orthographic shifts over the years. So if you look at the documents from before 1974, that is the dictatorship era, so it follows a rather antiquated orthography. So in 1974, they changed the orthography of Portuguese to make it more phonetic. And then in 2010, so it was all the Lusophone countries, they signed an accord, I would say, to the new orthographic accord to try and standardize the orthography of the Portuguese language. And in terms of pronunciation, I would say due to the predominance of Brazil, so I noticed some Brasileirismos entering into European Portuguese and also Mozambican and Angolan Portuguese. I think that is from what I've heard, though I don't have an experience.
Okay. And you also know the language Konkani, right?
Yeah, it's my mother tongue.
Oh, okay. Do you also teach it?
No, I have not taught Konkani. Formally, I have studied Goan Konkani only up to 7th standard in Devanagari script. But one interesting feature about Goan Konkani is that it is written in the Devanagari script as well as the Roman script. So it has
Okay.
two different scripts.
Okay. Thank you. Dhruv, I would like to ask you about the MA program in Portuguese language that is run in the Goa University. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, in fact, so the Goa University is the only university in South Asia and one of the few in the Asian continent that has not only a master's but also a bachelor's program in Portuguese. So
I
now
see.
from this year, so the master's program in Portuguese was started in 1987, ran up to 2001. Then there was, due to reasons that I'm unaware of, so between 2001 and 5, it did not exist and it was restarted in 2005. The bachelor's program in Portuguese at Goa University was started in 2019. Now we have a bachelor's and master's in Portuguese at Goa University. And with this year, Goa University has implemented NEP. So now this is going to transform into an integrated BA and MA in Portuguese. 4 years of BA and 1 year of MA.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, that is great. And what are the academic activities that go on here?
So apart from the BA and MA Portuguese, so we also offer a certificate course in Portuguese for the public, that is A1, A2, these language courses with material supplied by Institute Camões. We have an MOU with Institute Camões. So the lecturer of Institute Camões is visiting lecturer at our department. So we have a certificate course in Portuguese, which is taught by my colleague. It is for public, for the general public in evenings. So apart from this, we also have a visiting research professors program in which certain professors from Portugal who specialize in the field of Indo-Portuguese studies visit Goa University and take 1 credit courses, which are offered in English, not to the only to the students of the university, but also to members of the public. So this ranges from the Indo-Portuguese creoles that are spoken in India, such as in Korlai, the Korlai Creole, for example. And then we have another course on the Indo-Portuguese architecture that is prevalent in Goa. So
among other things, yes.
Among other things.
Yes. Dhruv, you have attended various workshops on using songs while teaching French. This is very interesting. Please tell us about it.
So I have attended one workshop actually on the use of songs in teaching Portuguese, not French. So it was very interesting.
Okay.
No issue. So it was in 2016 and I found it interesting because songs can help to lighten the mood of a class and get students interested in the language. For example, I remember there was a focus in this workshop, there was a focus on how can use songs to teach the subjunctive tenses in Portuguese, which are very prominent in Portuguese. So as far as that I'm aware of, Portuguese is the only language I know which uses the future subjunctive tense very prominently. So in fact, the future subjunctive tense and the imperfect subjunctive. So these are actually used more than the present subjunctive tense. So how do you get students to take an interest in learning these tenses? Because just by hearing these names, so students can get overwhelmed. So if these tenses can be introduced through by the means of songs, it can help to lighten. And another tense I would say is the personal infinitive tense, which I don't know if it's used in other languages. Even these tenses can be introduced by the means of songs.
I see. Okay, this is very interesting. Dhruv, tell us how a language learning, how language learning helps to improve intercultural communication?
So, as I think there's a very common dictum, I think that what we do not know, we fear. So I think we Indians have an advantage of being multilingual by default. So
True,
for
true.
example, and the language is a point of entry to that particular culture which it possesses.
Yes. Yes.
Learning a language can help to introduce a student to the culture of that particular community, and which in turn can help to increase intercultural communication. So for example, I
Yes.
grew up trilingual, Konkani
Okay.
in Hindi, English, and even Marathi to an extent. And I was introduced to Portuguese later. So I grew up multilingual, and it helped to broaden my horizons and explore new avenues. And I think it can do the same for other students of foreign languages and Indian languages too.
I see. Okay. So yeah, just going back to the MA and BA program offered in your university. So who can take admission to these programs?
So for the BA program, so we have removed the, you can say, prerequisite of prior knowledge of Portuguese, so that we can introduce the students to the Portuguese language by means of the minor course that we have now through NEP or the skill enhancement courses. So the major paper, which is a core paper, we are going to teach bilingually in English and Portuguese, so that the student is exposed to both languages and he or she can then gradually learn the language through the during his or her first year. For the MA Portuguese program, though, the minimum requirement is a B1 level in Portuguese.
I see. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Now we are seeing a lot of technology being brought in language learning also and language teaching also. So what are your thoughts about it? I'd like to know.
The language technology, I don't know if you, by this, do you mean the various language learning apps or for translations?
Yes, totally.
So with regards to the language learning apps, one thing I noticed is that, or even on the internet, that 98%. So since I would just add over here that the Portuguese language has two registers. I would say the European Portuguese, which is used in Europe and Africa, and the Brazilian Portuguese variant. So for obvious reasons, due to the predominance of Brazil, so 98% of the material, Portuguese language material available on the internet and on language learning apps is in Brazilian Portuguese.
Okay.
So while we here at Goa University, so traditionally we have taught in European Portuguese, but now we have a Brazilian visiting lecturer also through an MOU with the Brazilian government, that is through the Brazilian consulate. So, so she is a lecturer of the Institute Guimarães Rosa, which is the Brazilian Portuguese equivalent of the Alliance Française, Goethe Institute, etc. So now we are introducing the Brazilian register also. But what this does is it places the learners of European Portuguese at a disadvantage, because the writing system and the pronunciation is somewhat different. Although the grammar is the same, the language is the same, but it's a bit different. So this is not a challenge, also it's just an observation.
Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Do you plan to learn any more languages?
So far I have learned, while I was in Pune, I made the most of my stay in Pune. So I already knew Portuguese. I learned French and B1 level of German and 1 level each of Japanese and Mandarin. And while I was in Portugal, I did 1 level each of Danish and Dutch, just out of curiosity. But
oh my God.
But I would like to complete B2 in German and B2 in Spanish, and even and learn even the Oriental languages.
Okay. Which you have started already, like Japanese and Chinese,
Mandarin.
Mandarin.
Yes, but
Hmm.
also even more than Japanese and Mandarin, I would like to, more than the Oriental languages, I should say, would like to learn the Middle Eastern languages, Arabic and Farsi.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. Nice. Great. You are already learning so many and you will learn more, I'm sure.
Yes, as you say, to your own, to answer your own question, intercultural communication.
Yes, totally. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Dhruva. That was a nice conversation.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for participating in the show. I wish you all the best for your journey of learning languages.
Thank you very much, ma'am. So it was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me to e-Prasaran.
Pleasure. You're welcome. Bye bye. Have a good day.
You too.
Hello, friends. I wanted to let you know that I will be taking a short break from my show. It will be a breather to recharge and come back with more linguistic discussions. I want to express my gratitude once again to Mr. Atul Vaidya and E. Prasaran for their invaluable support in helping me reach out to an audience of more than 7 million people through this platform. Without their support, I would not have been able to extend my reach beyond just a few hundred people. Also, I extend a big thank you to the esteemed guests who participated in the show wholeheartedly. All the previous interviews will be available for some time on ePrasaran, but they are also available on my YouTube channel with the same name, Language Talks. In the meantime, if you want to share feedback or want to get in touch with me, please send a mail to lalitamarathe@gmail.com. Looking forward to reconnected with you. Stay tuned.